is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
We're barely bowl eligible here on KC Sports Network. I'm Tucker Franklin, joined by ESPN's Matt Miller on today's episode of Barely Bowl Eligible, your college football podcast for us here at KC Sports Network. Matt, we didn't have you last week. We're down Matty Lane, who was with us last week. You guys are kind of flip-flopping. He's now out on vacation. How are you doing? How was your week?
It was good, man. It was good. I was in Hawaii, which if you've watched the news, the kind of the devastation in Maui right now, definitely thinking of everyone who was there. It was surreal to be flying out of such a beautiful place and then that evening see the news, of what was going on. But highly recommend Hawaii if you haven't been. Obviously, give them some time and space to take care of their own right now. But if you haven't been, it's gorgeous. It was great to unplug. I need to do that every year. I need to, like the week before college football starts or 2 weeks before college football starts, take a little vacation and unplug one more time. And then send the kids back to school and then, get back to work. So I'm excited, man. I think I've watched like 4 preseason games already, three preseason games already. So I'm juiced, man. Yeah.
Football is back. I think there's a total of like 9 days without an actual football game between now and the start of week 1. I think is somebody did the math for that. So that's great. Everyone loves to hear that. But college football just around the corner. We're continuing our conference previews. We're doing the Big Ten since Matty Lane's not here. He doesn't like to talk about the Big Ten. We're getting it out of the way for him so he doesn't have to talk about it. But Matt, first, I wanted to talk to you about conference realignment because while you were gone, I don't know if you heard, it picked up a whole lot while you were gone.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, it feels like I left and the Pac-12 left with me. It's wild. And, I've talked to you guys about this before. I feel like I'm old now in this industry. I just turned 40. So I've seen some realignment, over the years. But, gosh, it's just sped up so much here lately. And Texas and Oklahoma kind of kicked things off a couple of years ago. They're going to move to the SEC next year. And now it feels like, everybody's just chasing the TV money. And I actually thought Mizzou head coach Eli Drinkwitz had some very good points about nobody asks about the athlete. Nobody thinks about the sports other than football. Everybody right now is just chasing that TV money, which understand it. If somebody wants to pay you, you kind of got to go where the money is. But it's the Wild West right now with realignment, man. And as a certified geography nerd, I'm having a hard time with the idea of, Washington and Oregon being in the Big Ten. I have an even a harder time with the idea of Cal and Stanford being in the ACC. Like, you're the Atlantic Coastal Conference, and you're going to have, last time I checked, California, which is the Pacific. Stanford's not even on a coast, really. Or Cal, I don't know, man. It's wild. So I am excited, though. I know a lot of people have been they've been shitting on realignment, and they're like, oh, we're ruining college football. I'm trying to put a silver lining on it. The idea that just in the Big Ten alone, we're going to get to see USC and UCLA and Washington and Oregon going against some of the blue bloods, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Wisconsin. We're going to see those schools going against just a completely different style of football. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Let's try to look at some of the great matchups we're going to get out of realignment, because guess what? We can't do anything about it. Can't do a damn thing about these teams switching sides. So I'm just going to try to have fun with that, that 11 a.m. kickoff. There's going to be some really good football in it.
It's going to be an 11 a.m. kickoff between USC and Iowa. And it's going to be, what would that be on the East Coast then? That would be
noon.
9 a.m.?
At 9 a.m. on the Pacific Coast. Yeah.
It's Pacific, yeah.
Yeah, it's an adjustment. As somebody whose body is still trying to adjust to a 5-hour time difference, it's horrible. Wow. So, yeah, there's going to be some jet lag. But guess what? If you're a USC, some airline is flying you for free. Delta's giving you guys the cushy, the Delta One seats. Caleb Williams is not flying coach to Ames, Iowa to play a football game, guys. They're going to be just fine. He probably has a wheels up deal or something anyway. So they'll be okay. I'm sure of it. It's the other sports that are going to take the hit. It's the softball team and the lacrosse teams that are going to take the hits.
I know a lot of people in and around the Kansas City area specifically have kind of not necessarily taken exception to what Eli Drinkwitz has said, but I think the general consensus has been that Eli Drinkwitz said the quiet part out loud, and it was good for him to speak up and say that. but kind of like who it's coming from, because people like to point the finger at Missouri for conference realignment for some reason. I'm glad that they think that Missouri was important enough to kick off conference realignment, and like that Nebraska didn't leave first and Colorado didn't leave first. But I appreciate people for thinking that. I really do. But also, Eli Drinkwitz was not around at Missouri when they left the SEC. So Eli
coaches don't have a say. Like it's not like Lincoln Riley's like, you know what, we should go to the Big Ten. I actually bet you that Lincoln Riley's like, what are we doing? Like we could win the Pac-12. We could, and now that you have Washington and especially Oregon, like that's the big one. Like I understand USC thinks, hey, we'll go to the Big Ten. We're going to get more national exposure. We're going to be able to recruit nationally a little bit better. Now you got Oregon with all that money following you. I can't imagine Lincoln Riley's super happy about, the way things are standing. I'm a Texas fan, so I say a lot of this tongue in cheek. My man ran from the SEC. He didn't want a thing to do with Nick Saban and Kirby Smart and Brian Kelly. He ran to the Pac-12, and now you're going to have to deal with the Big Ten. So it's going to be kind of funny to see how that plays out.
It does seem like that we're in an arms race right now with the Big Ten and the SEC. They're just trying to grab as many quality teams as they can. SEC said they're kind of not in the looking for expansion. Who knows? They're always in the looks for expansion. That's what Greg Sankey's going to say during all of this. But I think what's really interesting, and when you start to look at it, Matt, I made a joke about how they should just take 2 power conferences and do divisions, and then to take the 4 division winners, and then basically make the NFL playoffs.
Right.
And that's what they should end up doing when it comes to all of that. Keep the bowl games too for the extracurriculars. Those are all fun. Have some teams that didn't quite make the playoffs go to a bowl game. That's all fine. I think that's a great model to model it after. But I know that some people in the Big 12 are kind of dancing on the grave, right, of the Pac-12, because they kind of have some sort of this rivalry going on once the OU and Texas left, and the Pac-12 said that they were going to poach teams from the Big 12 and so on and so forth. But I'm curious, what are your thoughts about the new Big 12? When you look at the teams in there, it's not like they added powerhouse schools. It just looks like they've got a lot more schools, but it seems like more quantity over quality, in my opinion.
I was going to say, the Big 12 is like finishing second last in a race and turning around and pointing at the person who finished last. I mean, let's calm down. I will always, think of myself as someone who's from Big 12 country, Big 8 country, if you want to get real old on it. But I don't think that, if you're a KU fan, a K-State fan, I know you guys have a lot of viewers who are from that area, a lot of fans of those teams. I think right now you're saying maybe we can finally win this, conference, because, you are getting some of the power schools out of there. And adding Colorado, who might be the worst team in college football this year. I mean, we've talked about them before, Tucker, where, it's a completely new roster, basically. Yeah. I just don't know that that's something where you should be super excited about your additions. We'll see. We'll see, man. I think for those Kansas schools, if you're a TCU fan, if you're a Houston fan, you're probably pretty excited, because I think you do have a pathway to winning a conference, to having some more credibility on a national level. And you are going to, you're going to dominate that time slot for a lot of people on TV, which I know like coaches and we in the media talk about all the time, like, oh, the more you're on TV, the easier recruiting is. I don't know that that's particularly true in this day and age, where social media is such a huge driver for that demographic. Hasn't really helped Notre Dame a whole lot in that department. They're on TV every week. But I think for the Big 12, I would wait before dancing on too many grapes. Like the Mountain West is real close to making some additions that put them on par with the Big 12. So maybe we hold up a little bit.
Right. That's the next thing I wanted to get to is what goes on? What happens now to the Pac-12? I know that I made a tweet almost immediately when it happened that I said I couldn't wait for the Mountain West and Pac-12 merger. I think they still want to carry on the Pac-12 name if that merger does happen in the history that the Pac-12 does have. But you're right. They kind of lose their distinguishability, I guess. I think I just made that word up, of a Power 5 conference. And I think even the college football playoff said like they're going to have to reevaluate their structure if that does sort of happen, because those aren't traditional Power 5 schools. I don't know if you can consider them a Power 5 conference if they do merge.
I mean, do we really want? I like Oregon State. Jonathan Smith's a hell of a coach. Do we really want Oregon State in an automatic bid? If they win the Pac-12, I mean, is that? So I do think, and I don't want to go back to the BCS model. I hated that. I don't think that that's best for football, but some form of a hybrid between the BCS and the playoff is probably where we're headed, because the conference has been changing so much. And even, we're talking about the Big Ten or the SEC or the Big 12. Do you only want one Big Ten team that's an automatic qualifier? If you've got 16 or 18 teams in these conferences, it feels like you need to open the door a little bit more. It's going to be fun. I think it's going to create more parity in college football, because it's going to be harder. It's going to be harder for Alabama to play. They're playing 9 games in conference. You're getting better teams. You're, no disrespect to Vanderbilt, you're not getting the easy games, within your conference as often. So, same for some Michigan. Like Jim Harbaugh might be suspended the first 4 games and no one even cares, because Michigan's first 4 games are such a joke. So I think for parity's sake and for competitiveness, everybody's going to be a lot more excited.
I think so too. It's going to be really interesting to where those 4 teams goes. As you mentioned, there's been some talks about some of them going to the ACC. The ACC is in a super weird position just because of the contract situation that they have with the TV deals. And I know that there's been some expressed interest from other schools in the ACC to test the waters elsewhere, but it becomes such a hard position for those ACC teams to get out of that contract that they're looking at like overseas funding money type of money to when it comes to try to get out of that contract.
It's going to be the LIV instead of the ACC at this point. The money that's coming in. And I think that is one thing where, same with the Mountain West, you can look at what the commissioners did to keep those teams together, where the buyouts are just so expensive that it's not really feasible. And I also I think the ACC is kind of doing a good job of saying, like, we're going to be selective. We're not just going to take teams to take teams. And, for like the Big 12, they've talked about, hey, we'll add an Arizona because that's good for basketball. The ACC is not saying, hey, we'll take Stanford and Cal because it's good for, the academic side of things. And you've got, Stanford has had some moments, Cal not as many, but I don't see the ACC just like lining up to say, okay, well, wait, we need 15, 16 teams because everyone else does. So I think they're doing a good job of being selective. And, I think it also makes it interesting. I saw people talking about, does a North Dakota state get enticed to bump up now, because they've dominated that level of play, so do you have a North Dakota State coming up from the FCS? Do you have a Missouri State coming up from the FCS? Probably not most state, but there's definitely some schools where you look at the population size, things like that maybe they start to make sense to some of these conferences who are it's almost like a land grab at this point.
Right. It is. It does almost seem like a battle for supremacy. As much land as you can grab. It's really interesting. But Matt, we are on today's podcast to talk about the Big Ten. Obviously, the Big Ten adding, those 4 teams that we did mention from the Pac-12. But this year, they're not going to be participating in the Big Ten. So we'll talk about the teams that are actually going to that'll be participating in the conference. And I don't think we can start the conversation about the Big Ten anywhere else, but with Michigan and Ohio State, 2 of the big dogs. And truthfully, I think it's one of those 2 teams are going to win this conference, and I think it comes off Michigan's coming off back-to-back conference championships. It's going to be their conference to lose, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm with you, Tucker. And I think the betting lines kind of point that direction. The last time I saw, at least, is that Michigan's the favorite for good reason. Like you said, back-to-back conference championships, back-to-back years beating Ohio State, and that's a big part of it. Last year, game's tight early. Blake Corum goes down with an knee injury, and you think, shit, what, Michigan might be done. Donovan Edwards comes in, rushes for 216 yards off the bench. Michigan rolls. Obviously, the college football playoff, if you watch those, you watch Ohio State against Georgia, and you're like, where the hell was that against Michigan? You watch Michigan lay an egg against TCU, and kind of, it's like, what just happened with these schools who a couple weeks ago, they looked like the complete opposite. So I don't think we're going to see Michigan run away with it, but the experience level for the Wolverines is so much higher this year. There's probably going to be a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. We mentioned it. Jim Harbaugh bought some cheeseburgers for some students. He's probably going to get suspended for 4 games. They're going to be pissed off about that. J.J. McCarthy returns to quarterback. That's such a huge, vital part of what Michigan has offensively. They have, I think, the best backfield in college football with Corum and Edwards behind him. And you got an offensive line, back-to-back Joe Moore awards. The defense is loaded. Will Johnson's probably the best corner in college football. They've always got dudes on the front 7. For Ohio State, it's almost the opposite. You have Marvin Harrison Jr., stud. Emeka Egbuka, stud. Julian Fleming, who's their third receiver, will be a starter almost everywhere else. Cade Stover's a very good tight end. They got 2 great running backs. But at quarterback, we have no idea what they have. They're replacing 3 starters on the offensive line. And the Ohio State secondary has not been the same as of late. We've seen them get carved up by teams. And so I think that's the other side of it is this doesn't feel like the Ohio State that we were all used to. And maybe Kyle McCord is the next great Ohio State quarterback. They've had one hell of a run at that position. So you don't want to write the kid off. He's a junior. He'll be making his first start. But there's at least a bit of an unknown at quarterback and on the offensive line for Ohio State that makes you think Michigan is a little bit of a better football team, at least right now. The Saturday after Thanksgiving, that might be a completely different story after Kyle McCord's played 9-10 games. But right now, at least, Michigan looks like the better team.
And the coaches agree with both of us there, too. Is in the coaches poll, they were number 2 in the country. Obviously, number 1, Georgia, a team. You can't put Georgia not number 1 right now. We'll talk about the SEC later, later in a couple episodes. But Michigan number 2, Ohio State number 4. So that's in the most recent coaches poll that came out. And I want to talk about Michigan for a little bit because they are so interesting. I believe they returned 13 starters, including some starters at some very important positions. They do lose a couple of guys on the offensive line, but they retooled with 2 senior grad transfers that are very heavily experienced that will just going to go right back into that offensive line. So if you're a Michigan fan, you got to feel good about this offense.
Yeah, you have to, especially like we talked about. You got McCarthy coming back, who he is somehow underrated, and I don't want to be the person that overrates him, but looking at what he did last year and some of the development he had over the course of the season, he's the best quarterback Jim Harbaugh has had at Michigan. And I know that's not saying a lot, but he's still super talented. And like you said, you bring in Ladarius Henderson, who's going to be the starter at left tackle, a ton of experience there. Zach Zenter, their right guard, is like just a seek and destroy. Chiefs fans would love watching it because he fits that kind of like badass mentality of like, he's going to pull and trap and he's going to put people in the ground when he makes contact. So they do. Again, they have a great offensive line. They're very well coached there. And they've got, experience at wide receiver. They've got 2 starters, Cornelius Johnson and Roman Wilson, starters at wide receiver, and just the tight end room. Loveland, one of the tight ends, Colson Loveland is great. AJ Barner transfers in. Like you look at Michigan, and it's just like experience, and great, really great coaching. They have not taken a step back, and the coaching side of things, I think Harbaugh has learned to delegate. He's learned to hire and develop coaches, and the defense is loaded with upperclassmen as well. So there's just, I don't see a whole lot of room for a drop off with Michigan.
Absolutely. And I can remember seeing that coaches poll come off, and I initially was, because I hadn't truthfully been paying much attention to Michigan football. I'll put hand up, haven't been paying attention. I was like, number 2 seems a little high, a little rich. Michigan. Yeah. And then I started looking into it. I was like, oh, you know what? No, never mind. That does look about right. When you talk about number 2 in the country, because I was like, over Alabama? But Alabama also has a quarterback problem, much like Ohio State does, as you touched on.
And Georgia. We got to be like all these top teams, except for Michigan, are breaking in a new quarterback. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
It's very interesting. When Stetson Bennett was there for 43 years, it kind of helped. Michigan made some consistency. Or not Michigan, Georgia. But anyway, I want to talk about Ohio State. You kind of touched on them a little bit, but Marvin Harrison Jr., potentially the best player in the country. I know Caleb Williams has a good spot for that, but Marvin Harrison Jr. is a guy, and I think he has a connection with one of the quarterbacks. I can't remember which one it was. They went to high school together, if I can remember off the top.
Yeah. I think it's McCord. Maybe too many names floating around in my head. Marvin Harrison Jr. is good. He's really, really good, Tucker. It's funny because we're getting old enough that guys who we watch play as kids, their kids are now becoming great college players and draft prospects. And the crazy thing about Junior is he's bigger than his dad. Who's a Hall of Fame NFL wide receiver. He's 6'4", 215, runs like the wind. He's got this awesome stride, a huge catch radius. And last year he was supposed to be the number 2 wide receiver behind Jackson Smith-Njigba. JSN gets hurt, and Marvin Harrison becomes the dude. And we saw a huge difference in that Georgia game before and after he got hurt. The offense really stalled without him. And I think even one of the questions about CJ Stroud as a draft prospect this past year was, what's he going to look like not throwing to, Godzilla at wide receiver, basically. And so, yeah, there's going to be a fair debate. Should Marvin Harrison Jr. be a Heisman contender? Should he be, there was conversation, should he even play this year, because he's going to be a top 3 or 4 draft pick, regardless of what he does this year. So, yeah, he's special. Emeka Egbuka, their number 2 receiver, would be the number 1 receiver pretty much everywhere other than Ohio State. Like, he's that good himself. So they're loaded. They're loaded at receiver. They're loaded at running back. And they go 2-3 deep at running back that a lot of schools would like to have, with Mine Williams and Travion Henderson, who are both going to be players we talk about when it comes time for the NFL draft. So they're stocked. It's just a matter of a very young, inexperienced offensive line and a quarterback we've never seen play before. Those are the questions. And I think it's fair to say Ohio State is kind of underperformed. When you look at the talent they've had, God, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, JSN, now you've got Marvin Harrison, you've had top picks, Justin Fields, CJ Stroud at quarterback, and you've underperformed. So I think Ryan Day is not on the hot seat, but I think there's been more talk than ever before of, hey, can this guy win? Can he win the Natty? Because you got all this talent, and you're not winning. So I think there's at least a little bit of heat on a seat that's not hot. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like Ryan Day would ever be fired from Ohio State, but I think there's some pressure there to get over the hump.
Do you think if he loses to Michigan for the 3rd year in a row, that seat gets a little bit warmer?
I mean, just because Urban Meyer's just sitting out there cashing checks on Fox, yeah. I mean, if Urban were having success somewhere else coaching, then you would maybe be like, okay, yeah, I don't know. Ryan Day's. The guy's lost like 8 games since he's taken over as head coach. But just like with Jim Harbaugh, when he couldn't beat Ohio State, what do we talk about every year? Man, he might go to the NFL. He can't beat Ohio State. Maybe he should go be the coach of the Chicago Bears or something. And for Ryan Day, it might be time to have that same conversation. If you lose 3 in a row to Michigan, you can't call like that school up north or whatever and not beat them. Like, if you're going to talk that shit, you got to beat them. So I do think there's going to be if the fact that Urban is unemployed as a coach is what makes it really interesting, because that dude's itching to get back, and the Notre Dame job is probably not opening up. So it's if the Ohio State one, he might be working some behind doors things to put some pressure on Ryan Day.
It could be pushing that narrative there. I think that's wildly interesting, especially when you talk about Ohio State, Michigan. And even I was telling you before we started this podcast, admittedly, I said, Matt, outside of Ohio State and Michigan, I don't know if I know a whole lot about this conference, this Big Ten. But outside of those teams, I think Penn State is probably the other one that is worth paying attention to. They have the opportunity to play spoiler to really either one of Michigan or Ohio State. What are your thoughts on that team this year?
Yeah, Penn State, this is the best team James Franklin has had. And he's had a lot of talented players, but this is the best team. I think it starts with left tackle Olu Fashanu, who I think would have been a top 10 pick last year had he come out. He goes back to school. He's going to get some experience. He's going to be a top 5 pick probably. He's super talented. Drew Alar is a stud at quarterback. I'm very excited to see what he can become. He's a sophomore. He's kind of a development player, but I think he's going to be really good. Nick Singleton at running back, another sophomore who he's built like Saquon was, so he's going to be a blast to watch. But, man, it's the defense where they're so talented. Chop Robinson at one-sided defensive end, Adisa Isaac at the other. Probably the best defensive end duo in college football. They're linebackers. They've got 3 of them that could be All-Americans. Abdul Carter, Curtis Jacobs, both studs. Kalen King at corner could be one of the best corners in the country. So the defense is really, I think, what could carry this team. That's not to say the offense won't be great, but the defense is like they could actually match up with some Ohio States, with some Michigans, and they have Michigan at home. They have Ohio State on the road. They're going to be a fun team to watch. I think they're ranked 7th in the preseason polls, or they were the last poll I saw. So they're talented. And this is, like we were saying, this is what's fun about the Big Ten when you're thinking about adding a USC or adding a UCLA or a Washington or an Oregon. I think I checked the other day. If you look at like next year, there would be like 7 teams in the top 15 that are in the Big Ten. So that parity's coming to the Big Ten, and Penn State has a chance here with some of these young guys, especially with Drew Alar, quarterback, to really kind of gain a foothold a little bit as the Big Ten changes.
The Big Ten does their media days a little bit differently, because I was trying to look up their preseason poll, but they do some preseason honors, and it's a 10-member preseason list with 5 representatives from the East and the West. Leave it to the Big Ten to do something completely different.
Just pick teams, damn it.
I know. Just be normal. Don't be legends and leaders. Just do East and West. That was a deal. But anyway,
yeah.
Right. All right. I think they gotta bring it back, right? They gotta bring back.
Now they're gonna have to. Yeah.
There's no geographical way that they can convince me that Nebraska and USC should be in the West together.
Yeah, west of the Mississippi. Yeah,
right. Yeah, that's the line. Fashanu was named to on the East squad of the 5 players. So a guy that I know that when we started doing draft stuff here at KCSN was a guy that we watched a little bit, thinking he could come out, and he did. Yep. So I mean, that's always fun when you get to see guys that you watched from the previous year go back to school and you can see them play again. But no, Penn State's a very interesting team. Everything, the dynamic there is, I do feel like, as you mentioned, they're a little underrated when it comes to this conference. So I think to the casual fan, when it comes to Penn State, you do, when you think of the Big Ten, just think about Michigan, Ohio State. But I think that the win total for Michigan is at 10.5. And it's a very interesting one because they do have to go to Penn State. Listen, those people in Vegas are good at their jobs.
Yeah,
they have to go to Penn State, and I think that could be a trip up, a game that where I'm looking at, I'm like, that could be a good game there. And obviously, I think they host Ohio State this year.
Yeah.
So those 2 games are going to be the 2 ones that you're going to be keeping an eye on. But that Penn State game is one that they could play spoiler, I think, big time to them.
Yeah, that 10.5, I would take the over, but gosh, that is really good. You're kind of looking at that saying like, okay, they could lose to Penn State. And I don't think that would be an upset. You know, it would be like, disappointing. This Michigan team was really good, but Penn State's really good. So, I mean, if you lose to Penn State and Ohio State, you're probably at 10 wins, right? I don't have the schedule right in front of me. I think they play 12. So, yeah, I mean, it's possible. I'm sure Ohio State's over-under is probably the same, right? Would be my guess, yeah.
No, it's really interesting. They also got Dante Cephas from Kent State, the wide receiver.
Yes.
Yeah, the Penn State did. And I think that could be a sneaky one for him. A guy from Kent State who rolled over the MAC. I mean, I always like watching the MAC because you get to see a lot of guys that nowadays you get to see guys that will transfer other places,
right?
Because it's a very talented conference. It really is. There's a lot of good players in there. But now you can get a little early scouting view on who's going to be playing for Alabama, Georgia, or whoever.
Right. It's like watching the Royals, and you're like, this guy's gonna be a Yankee or an Angel soon. You know, that's the max now.
That's funny. All right, Matt, let's kind of wrap up here with some other teams that we should keep an eye on in the Big Ten. I know there's a lot of other teams, but I don't know how seriously should we take all of these other teams, if that's an insensitive question. But I think there's a lot of unserious teams in this conference.
Yeah, I mean, Wisconsin is ranked in the top 25. You know, they should be. Luke Fickell comes in as head coach. Braylon Allen, the running back, is a super talented player. They're always tough, and I think Fickell's going to be really good for Wisconsin. I don't think they're there yet. It might be, a 2024 thing once this conference actually gets, super complicated to play in. After that, this year, like Iowa, no. Nebraska, Maryland, no. Like they're good teams. They're going to have draft prospects that we talk about, but
absolutely,
this is just not. It's not the year. I think if you want to pick a team, Illinois, they've been really well coached. They've got good draft prospects. Sherzon Newton, their defensive tackle, has a chance to be a first-round player. So, like, Illinois has got some dudes, especially on defense. But as you said, I mean, this is really, Michigan State had that 1 year, I guess 2 years ago, where we thought, oh, man, like, no, Hal Tucker might have Michigan State back. They paid him a ton of money, and then they were terrible last year. So it's like it does feel like it's Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, and then probably Michigan State, Wisconsin, Illinois. But I think Wisconsin's firmly fourth. After that, it's a conversation. And Matt Rule at Nebraska, though, like I know it was bad in the NFL, but Matt Rule can coach some college football, and especially with the transfer portal era. Like they were just taking JUCO dudes left and right at Baylor back in the day, and he flipped that program fast. I think the combination of the Nebraska legacy and Matt Rule's ability to scout players and develop them in the college level is really going to help Nebraska. I grew up in that time when Nebraska was a blue blood. I'm not a fan by any means, but I think it'd be cool for Nebraska to be good again. So I am rooting for Matt Rule to get things turned around there.
I haven't really thought about Nebraska since the Ndamukong Suh era, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, since he almost killed Colt McCoy and ruined every Texas fan's year. That's the last time you've really ever thought about it.
So I know everybody in Nebraska. I went to Northwest Missouri State, which is the northwest corner of the state, which is very close to Nebraska. So I'm acquaintances with a lot of Nebraska fans, and they are so hungry to be relevant again. And when it comes to college football, rightfully so. A 90s powerhouse that was a destination where everybody wanted to go. Now, they got a couple of coaches that didn't quite live up to the legacy. They fired Bo Pelini for winning 9 games all the time. Maybe that probably set the program back for just firing a guy who would win 9 wins all the time. But man, to get that back would be another blue blood to come back. But again, as you mentioned, like I was in a weird spot too. They're dealing with a lot of gambling scandals right now in terms of the guys on their team. I don't know what's going to come out from that.
Yeah.
Insane. But listen, the Iowa kicker betting the under on the Iowa State game is quite possibly one of the funniest things ever.
I think smartest bets ever, right? You're like, yeah,
for sure. It's financial advice at that point.
Yeah, right. It was people forget that it was a smart bet. Like you shouldn't have done it, but it was a smart bet.
Yeah. But it's just so interesting. Everything that's coming out about all these college athletes placing bets, and I think the problem is that a lot of them are underage and are doing it illegally, which is a big problem. Not to mention the fact that they have a direct impact on how the game can be influenced as well. So very interesting there for the Big Ten. I know there was a little bit of controversy out of Minnesota a little bit. PJ Fleck coaching too hard. I think some former players called it a cult or something like that. It's very odd.
Kind of quieted down, right? Like it didn't hit the Northwestern level scandal. And which was, sounded terrible from the things you hear. With PJ Fleck, it's interesting. Some people were like, no, that's just hard coaching. These players are soft. Some people were like, it's a cult. But it's been quiet for a couple of weeks, which makes me think it might blow over.
Yeah. Well, hiring PJ Fleck, you had to know that, the row the boat thing was kind of cultish already to begin with.
Yeah.
But I get it. I get it. I was a big fan of PJ Fleck, truthfully. I thought that he was really good at Western Michigan.
I think all college football fans are. It's all of a Texas fan, and we have a hand sign we do to each other. You're telling me that's not kind of cultish? Like it definitely is, And it's some of us just admit it, some of us don't.
That's fair. All right, Matt. Thank you for hanging out with me, previewing the Big Ten. I think Matt Lane would be proud of our preview of the Big Ten. Not necessarily diving into all of the teams, but giving you guys what you needed to know about the Big Ten. The 4 teams really, that you needed to know about the Big Ten. Next week, we'll be back with, what do we have left? Do we just have the SEC left?
I think so. Of the Power 5, I believe that's right.
Well, we're not going to be previewing the Mountain West. I can tell you that right now. So, then we got the Week 0 preview, which that slate is electric.
Yeah.
Is one way.
They're your schedules now. Like I tell people, that's the weekend. Tell your wife, babe, or girlfriend, fiance, significant other, tell them, hey, I'm going to sacrifice 1 week of college football so we can do stuff together. Saturday, August 26th. Gentlemen, that is your day. Go ahead and clear the schedule. You got a little Caleb Williams against San Jose State that night. That's about it. So you're good otherwise.
Notre Dame is in Dublin to take on Navy. I think the whole U.S. Navy went to Ireland. I don't know how well that went over.
Got a fleet in Ireland, which I do maintain. I'm gonna go to that game one year. If they keep doing the Ireland game, I think it'd be awesome to do. One of these years, I'm just trying to convince the worldwide leader that they need to pay for it.
They need to put 2 better teams in it. Is what they need to do. First time, Ireland said we want college football, and the United States said, you know what? You can have Nebraska and Northwestern. That was the first time.
Yeah. Not great. Navy Notre Dame, there's at least a little more pageantry there. We can introduce the triple option to Ireland.
That's true. They're going to become a triple option country.
Yeah.
Love to see it. Matt, I appreciate you joining me for today's Barely Bowl eligible here on KC Sports Network. That's going to do it for today's episode. I'm Tucker Franklin. So until next time, we'll be back hopefully with the full crew previewing the SEC on next week's edition. We'll talk to you later.